Okay, this question comes from Pine Planet. As a game developer, should I play many games one time to have a wider understanding of the art of video games, or should I play the games I like many times to have a deeper understanding of that particular game and others like it? That's a good question. Playing games to get better at making games. It sort of lends itself to another conversation about how much time you actually have to play games if you're really into making games. I don't have a lot of time to play games anymore, really. I mean, that's in addition to having kids and other responsibilities as well. So, as you get older, you just have less time. But yeah, I've sort of felt a less interest to play games the more I've gotten into making them. But I do understand the idea of doing research and checking things out. My favorite game of all time is Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. That is the prime nostalgia of video games for me. And I can remember as a kid, I played the heck out of that game. Like, I would go to every corner that you could possibly go to, try to find places that you weren't supposed to go to. And then, back in those days, there weren't as many. I mean, there was no YouTube to show you how to do stuff or have walkthroughs. And there were, however, websites. And those websites like Zelda Power. That's a thing I hadn't thought about in a long time. Zelda Power. And they would have like a page of rumors and stuff. And I remember looking up those websites and going through those rumors, and it would be crazy rumors. How to find the Triforce, how to find this weapon that is super hidden, and they existed for other games too. There was Super Mario 64. There was a huge rumors about how you could be Luigi and how to find him in the game. But I remember just crawling over every inch of Ocarina of Time, and I guess to some extent Mario 64 too. As I got more interested in doing that and became more interested in game development, you start to look at things a little bit differently when you're playing through those games. And you kind of, you look at the shrubs that are in Ocarina of Time, you notice, hey, those aren't models. They're just, two sprites that are sitting on top of each other, or how the water works, or how, different effects of the game. Like, those things become so interesting that when you're playing through those games and you look at it. So I 100% think that if you are playing through a game, especially one that you know very well, and you can go around it, and you're purposeful in your intent about what you're trying to analyze, because it's really an analysis of what you're experiencing, right? I think that's what you mean. It's for example, like if you were going through, I think someone else actually in that comment thread talked about Dark Souls. Like, if you were going to go through any of the Souls games and really analyze, like, what's happening, when do beats in the action occur, how are things presented within the game. I thinking of Elden Ring, and I mentioned in another Q&A the Breath of the Wild, going out into the open out of the cave. The same thing happens in Elden Ring when you first start the game. You walk out, and then you open up into the world, thinking about why certain things are the way they are within that game. And it's really just analyzing your own experience as a player. I think that's maybe the most important thing you can take from those that exercise is analyzing your own experience. There's something very similar that I'm a musician before by trade, and when you're classically trained, what they have you do is you analyze the great pieces of music, right? You go through your Beethovens and your I mean, it's a lot of Beethoven. They really like Beethoven. But you go through your great pieces, your Beethovens, your Berlioz, your Bachs and your Mozarts, and you analyze how you're listening to that piece of music, and you pinpoint things you might notice, and it's I mean, they call it a skill. It's music listening, and I think in terms of games, there's the same thing. It's this really purposeful playing of a game and understanding and knowing what you're trying to analyze. I think in terms of what that looks like, I guess I go back to Dark Souls because that was mentioned in the comments. What jumps out at you when you're playing a game like that? How does the movement feel? And then even analyze, like, if you move slowly, like how does the animation change? Like you can really see a lot of things if you slow down and you don't just drive through playing the game. Like you could spend a lot of time just walking around and seeing how the player model interacts with stuff in the environment, or how they might interact to an enemy. Does their head turn when an enemy goes by, or when there's an item? I think, in terms of what games to do that with, it's tough to do really modern games because they're so complicated. They're so complex. Older games were working with a lot less. And so they had to do more with less, which is probably more in tune to how you are, a game developer. If you're an indie or solo, you're much more related to the people who had to work with less than AAA studios who have millions of dollars and tons of people working and just people hours. Like, it's not the same thing. And I think I've even mentioned before, going back to even just the beginning of 3D games, because I'm particularly interested in 3D. Like if you go back to early PlayStation or Mario 64 is like the pinnacle of 3D platforming. Like it laid the foundation. So like, what did Mario 64 do that you can analyze and replicate and see, how does this work? How does that work? Older games are worth checking out. And if you're working on a particular type of game, I think it makes sense to check out the games that fall in line with that genre or the type of game that you're working on. Go back through the classics and work your way through and find things that jump out at you and really inspire you as a maker, as a creator. And I think that's a good way to go about it.